The smell of roasted chicken hit me before I even stepped inside. I paused on the porch, straightening the collar of my blouse, forcing a breath into my lungs. Another family dinner, another evening of carefully curated smiles and politely swallowed truths. I opened the door. "Hey, there she is," my brother-in-law called out from the kitchen, already mid-laugh. I gave a wave, sliding out of my heels by the door and stepping into the scene like it was a performance. My husband was already seated, glass of wine in hand, nodding along to something his sister was saying. My mother-in-law bustled around the table, fussing with cutlery and napkins, like the Queen herself might be dropping by. The kids darted under the table chasing some toy that squeaked every 3 seconds. The whole room buzzed with energy, but beneath it I could feel it, that familiar undercurrent. Like everyone had rehearsed their roles, except me, I took my seat at the far end, closest to the kitchen. Always the helpful one, always within arm's reach of the dishes, the drinks, the chaos. I caught myself checking my phone, 2 emails from clients, 1 from my accountant. Big names, big deals. But I quickly turned it face down. No one needed to know, not tonight. Plates clinked, laughter echoed, and the wine flowed freely. My sister-in-law was bragging about her son's new school program, while my husband nodded like a bobblehead. I passed the salad bowl, smiled at the right moments, and did what I did best. Blend in, then he said it. "If you vanished today," my brother-in-law chuckled, stabbing a piece of chicken, "we'd probably celebrate. Imagine the peace and quiet." The table erupted, laughter bounced off the walls, forks tapping plates in rhythm with their delight. Someone even clapped. I looked around, my husband chuckled into his glass. My mother-in-law smiled as if it was the wittiest thing she'd ever heard. I didn't laugh, I didn't even flinch, but something in me, something deep, twitched. I stared at him, the man who once called me for a loan when his startup went belly up, who cried in my driveway when he needed help co-signing a lease. He didn't remember that, clearly. Sometimes I thought, your family is the one that cuts you deepest. I'd read that somewhere. It echoed now. I adjusted my napkin, nodded politely, and reached for the mashed potatoes. The conversation shifted, but my thoughts didn't. I watched their faces, so carefree, so certain in their stories about me. I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who smiled and served, the one who never left. "You're such a good wife," my mother-in-law cooed across the table. "Your little hobby really keeps you grounded. Jason's lucky." Little hobby. I sipped my wine slowly. Little hobby paid off our mortgage. Little hobby covered your family vacation when Jason's bonus didn't come through. Little hobby kept your son's business afloat last winter when he was too proud to ask anyone else. But sure, let's call it a hobby. My face didn't move, but my mind did. There's a thing that happens when you've been silent too long. A shift, not loud, not angry, just clean. I started to see it. Every time I bit my tongue, every lie I let sit in the air because keeping the peace was more important than correcting the record. They thought I was supportive. What I was tired. In America, I remembered saying to a colleague once, "We love underdogs, but only if they stay under." I looked around the table, Jason smiling with wine-stained teeth, my brother-in-law still riding high from his punchline, my mother-in-law rearranging her silverware. I had helped every one of them, quietly, generously, and they didn't even know. I noticed the silver serving spoon in the bowl of carrots, the one with the initials engraved on the handle, MGH. I'd had it custom made for our first Christmas together. No one had ever commented on it. Now it was scratched, dulled by years of use, forgotten, like me. I kept staring at it, that spoon, that damn spoon. I'd given it as a symbol of family, of contribution, of being part of something, and now it was just another utensil, shoved around by greasy fingers unnoticed. I didn't say a word, I didn't need to. By the end of dinner, the conversations had moved on to politics and traffic and some local scandal. I sat quietly, swirling the last of my wine. They laughed, they gestured, they made plans for next weekend, but inside me, a plan of a different kind began to take root. I smiled to myself, not wide, just enough. They laughed at the idea of me vanishing. They're about to see what that really means. The morning after that dinner, I was up before the sun. Not from any alarm, just awake. Like my body had caught up to what my mind had already decided. Jason was still asleep, his soft breathing steady, unaware that something inside me had cracked wide open. I padded down the hallway, wrapped in my robe, coffee already brewing. My home office sat quiet and untouched, as it had for weeks. I used to spend hours in there, building a life no one else seemed to notice. But that morning, it didn't feel like an office. It felt like a war room. I sat down, opened my laptop, and titled a blank document, "What I've Done for Them." At first, it felt strange, like I was documenting a dream I wasn't supposed to remember. But once I started typing, it poured out of me. Bullet points, dates, amounts, moments, a full history of being useful, of saying yes, of being the good one. The more I typed, the lighter I felt, like each line lifted a brick I'd been carrying for years. I had never seen it laid out like that before. There it was in black and white, $3,200 for Ramsey's failed tech business, $1,800 for Mum's dental implants when her Medicare didn't cover the bridge, 5 co-signed documents, 4 paid vacations gifted last minute because their credit cards were maxed out, and then came the little ones, babysitting on Christmas Eve while they flew to Miami, getting asked to stay late after hosting Thanksgiving so I could do dishes while they all watched football, being left off group texts, excluded from photos, told later with a shrug, "Oh, we thought you were too busy." No one ever said thank you, not once. Every time I told myself, it's just family, like that was supposed to make it okay, like that somehow excused the erosion of respect over time, but reading it now on screen, it felt criminal. I sat back, staring at the growing list. If they saw this, I thought, would they feel shame or just get defensive? Probably the latter. They were good at rewriting history, better than me at pretending nothing ever happened. The door creaked open. Jason wandered in, mug in hand, hair a mess. "You're up early," he said, yawning. "Couldn't sleep," I said without looking up. He stood there for a beat, then sipped his coffee and leaned against the doorway. Nothing, no mention of last night, not a single word about Ramsey's joke, or the way I sat frozen at the table while they laughed. I tested him. "What did you think of that joke last night?" I asked, still typing. He chuckled. "It's just Ramsey being Ramsey." That did it. That little sentence. Casual, convenient, dismissive. "And me being me," I said, slowly closing the laptop, "ends now." His eyes met mine for the first time that morning, but I wasn't searching for understanding anymore, just facts. And the fact was, he had never once defended me, not when I was mocked, not when I was erased. He was silent. Always. When I brought up being left off wedding invites or excluded from family trips, he'd say, "Don't take it personally," or worse, "You're being too sensitive." Every time I asked for backup, he played neutral. But neutrality, I realized, only serves the abuser. I wasn't looking at a husband anymore. I was looking at an accomplice. I turned back to the computer, saved the document under a new name, Exhibit A. No tears came, no yelling, just a slow, cool certainty. I stood and walked to the window, closed the blinds. The light dimmed instantly. Outside, birds chirped, cars passed. Inside, it was finally quiet. I printed the list. It took 3 pages. I folded them cleanly, placed them inside a red folder I pulled from the filing cabinet. With a black pen, I wrote across the front, "For when they ask what happened." I locked it in the bottom drawer. There was a calmness to the ritual. No rage, just preparation. Sitting back down, I opened a new email window, addressed it to no one. Subject line blank, just typed, "I've stayed quiet for too long. This is not an act of revenge. This is documentation." Then I closed the draft. As I walked past Jason in the hallway, he looked up from his phone. "Gonna be a quiet weekend?" I didn't stop walking. "Not for long," I said. The house felt too still, the kind of silence that hums with lies. I moved through the living room, observing the shadows on the wall, the muted hum of the furnace, the soft tick of the clock. Jason's workshop door remained closed, no word exchanged, no glances. Carved into the quiet was the memory of a lifetime of unspoken things. I folded laundry, shirts, socks, towels, letting my mind wander. The same emptiness I felt as a child when no one asked how I was. The same muted ache. I pinched my fingers, held the fabric, tried to anchor myself. Through the window I saw children biking past on the street, laughing. Moments that once belonged to me now belonged to others. Flashback came unbidden. I was 13, standing at the school gate as dusk fell. The sun dipped below the rooflines. I called home from the payphone. The voice on the other end sighed. "Oh, I thought your sister told you we couldn't pick you up tonight." I hung up. I sat alone on that curb until someone came. No apology ever came. That moment imprinted. Being forgotten is worse than being yelled at. Back in the present, I remembered a dinner 5 years ago. I asked why I'd been left off vacation planning. He laughed and said, "You always act like you're the victim." Jason chuckled then, leaning back in his chair. I swallowed something bitter. What if I wasn't overreacting? Maybe I was the only one capable of feeling. I opened my email, old threads, old apologies. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he often wrote. Words meant to make me doubt whether I even felt something real. So many times I was told I imagined slights. I was gaslit gently. I frowned, fingers hovering. Gaslighting isn't loud. It's the whisper that makes you question your own scream. And they whispered me out of my truth. I created a new document. This is real, not for them, for me. The empty screen waited. I typed patterns. How every disagreement ended with me apologizing. How asking for what I needed was always too much. I wrote until my fingers ached, then I didn't delete a single line. My vision blurred slightly. I closed the laptop, breathing slow. Clarity was rising. It felt shocking, like seeing in color after years of gray. Then ping. My phone buzzed. The family group chat resurrected itself. A message. "Let's not dwell on the past. Dinner Saturday?" It popped in bold. My heart tightened, then settled. I stared at it as if it were a dare. I whispered into the empty room, "That's all you've ever done, dwell in versions of the past that serve you." I didn't reply. I let it sit. I stood. The afternoon quiet pressed against my bones. I walked out of the room, leaving the document open, the chat unread. I would not show weakness, not tonight. I sat in the study with the red folder open again. The printed list stared back at me. Line after line of sacrifices, loans, silence. I read them not to remember, but to remind myself that it happened, that it wasn't all in my head, that I had receipts, even if no one else asked to see them. Then came the buzz. I glanced at my phone, a notification from a group I hadn't seen in months. Someone had added me back. The name was as lifeless as the people in it. Family updates, just that. No photo, no emoji, no warmth. I tapped it. The latest message was simple. "Dinner plan Saturday. Are you coming?" That was it. No hello, no "we missed you." No nod to my absence. I stared at the words. They moved on quickly, like I'd stepped out of the room for a minute and no one noticed I'd been gone for a year. I closed the app and stood. By late afternoon, I was pulling into the familiar driveway. I didn't announce I was coming, said I was dropping off a dish towel I'd borrowed. Stupid excuse, but it gave me access. The front door still creaked the same way. Inside, everything looked untouched. Framed photos lined the hallway, birthdays, graduations, holidays. Not one with me in it, not one. My name wasn't carved into this house. I was a ghost with keys. A ping came in, a text from Jason. Mum wants to see you later. Of course she does. But I didn't go to the kitchen. I turned down the hall and stepped quietly into my father's old office. I closed the door gently behind me. The air still smelled like him, old books and stale cologne. I was supposed to grab a folder I left here last month. Instead, I saw the safe tucked under the desk. Unlocked. Inside, a flash drive sat in the corner, labelled in shaky handwriting, Will Cheer Final to 2005. I plugged it into the old desktop without thinking twice. The file opened fast, paragraphs scrolled, names, bank names, property lines. Then my name, crossed out, in pen. A line through it like a teacher grading a wrong answer, replaced with someone else's initials. My heart didn't race, it slowed, a memory surfaced. My father up late one night, crumpling paper in the kitchen. I thought it was just insomnia. Now I knew. He didn't forget me, he erased me. By the time I got home, the group chat was buzzing again. I scrolled up. Messages from last month, the month before. We figured she moved away. Jason said she never replied to invites. Guess she's still too busy. Still too busy, I typed. Interesting. Paused, backspaced. I typed, I've been here the whole time. Paused again, backspaced again. Then I let it sit. They could wonder, let them spin their theories. Silence is power, but only if they fear what's behind it. Later that evening, Jason came home. I was walking down the hallway. We crossed at the entryway. Just past the bookshelf. I didn't wait. I found something disturbing today, I said, calm. The will. He blinked. You went through Dad's stuff? It was in the safe, I said, labelled, clear. He looked off. He was sick when he updated that. Was he? I tilted my head. Is that why my name was crossed out by hand? His jaw tightened. This is going to get messy. He stepped past me into the bedroom, closing the door with too much care, as if slamming it would admit guilt. I stood in the dim hallway. The house around me hummed again, and in the living room, just beyond the hallway light, I saw it, a figure sitting still. I knew the shape, my mother-in-law. She didn't say a word, just watched. They were always guarding secrets. Now I was forcing them to undo them. That morning, I boiled water for tea instead of brewing coffee. It felt like a small truce with myself, a deliberate slowing of my pulse after the storms of the last few days. I held the mug with both hands as if warmth alone could stop my mind from spinning. The kitchen was too quiet, like a stage waiting for a scene to begin. I walked from counter to counter, wiping spots already clean, straightening things that didn't need straightening, classic avoidance. My inner voice debated in circles. Was I being too harsh, too proud? Maybe bridges didn't have to burn. Maybe some could be crossed carefully, maybe. But another voice whispered, steady and sharp, don't mistake quiet for peace. I sat at the table and stared at my phone. I almost typed a message to my sister-in-law. Let's talk before the dinner. My thumb hovered over send. I deleted it. Tea went cold. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find her standing there with a tray of baked goods, the kind she never made herself. Hey, she said, soft smile. I thought I'd drop these off. We miss you. She leaned in for a hug. I tilted my shoulder enough to make it awkward but not hostile. She laughed it off. We're planning Dad's memorial next month. It wouldn't be right without you. You always had a way of making things organized. Her words slid around me like oil on water. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes flicked to the folder on my hall table. I invited her in, but stayed standing. You didn't call first. Spur of the moment, she said brightly. We just want you back. I smiled the way you do when you see a trap. Do you? We sat at the kitchen island. She talked about family unity, about healing, about how we were all under stress back then. I asked casual questions. Her answers circled the same spot. Then she slipped. It's just, you're still on the land deed, and we can't move forward with the sale until... She stopped herself, forced a smile. Ah, there it was. You always handled paperwork so well, she added quickly. No one else gets those forms like you do. I nodded slowly. This isn't healing, I said. It's a transaction. She blinked, tried to recover. That's not fair. We're reaching out. You're misremembering things. That dinner, nobody mocked you. We would never... You said I imagined it, I interrupted. She tilted her head, pitying. You always had such a vivid imagination. The room shifted. I saw every time my memory was called an overreaction, every slight turned into my sensitivity, every wound made my fault. If they could rewrite my past, what was left of my truth? I set the mug down, the clink sharp enough to make her flinch. I'm not signing anything, I said quietly. Not the papers, not the family fiction, not anymore. Her passive smile drained. We're trying to make this easier. I stood, walked to the door, opened it. Take your tray, I said, and take your story with you. She rose, sputtered something about regret, about how I was isolating myself. I closed the door mid-sentence. The latch clicked like a gavel. Back in the kitchen, the mug was still warm. I picked up my phone and deleted the unsent text about reconciliation. My reflection stared back at me in the black screen, eyes tired but clear. They wanted a forgiver, not a witness. Hours later, my phone rang, unknown number. I answered, a male voice, low, measured. I know what they asked you to sign, he said. I have something you need to see. I didn't ask who he was. Send it to my email, I said. I'll be waiting. I walked into that dinner like a ghost, returning to a house that had forgotten me. The hallway light fell slanted. My breath caught at seeing the same table, the same place setting, and there, of all places, the chair pressed close to the small restroom. Always the residual seat, always the reminder of where I belonged in the room. I forced a polite nod, slid into that chair and looked around, my napkin, my water glass, a plate waiting. Everyone else already seated, a gap beside me. I held my face calm. I passed the bread. I smiled when someone asked about traffic. No one offered a seat beside me. No one moved. The conversation circled. Outside, the dusk deepened. Inside, time held its breath. Halfway through the meal, as mashed potatoes stood at center, Corinne lifted her glass. Oh, by the way, I updated the property deeds last month, streamlining for tax purposes. Her voice was light. The room carried the statement as casually as a toast, but I felt the floor tilt. The paper in my mind flipped. The deed she never told me about. I paused. I recalled the PDF she had sent months ago. A link she said was for updates, and I glanced. My name was missing. I swallowed. I asked softly, what happened to my portion? My voice cut through the clamour. Silence followed. She shrugged, smoothing a fold in her napkin. It was easier to manage one entity. My heart sank, but my lips remained set. I looked down at my lap. The children whispered. The chairs shifted. I glimpsed a young one ask her sibling, "Why is Aunt Chanel sitting over there?" The sibling mumbled, eyes on plate. I felt that whisper of invisibility, the way they repositioned me inch by inch until I almost disappeared. I swallowed hard. They moved me by inches until I vanished. I stood, the air felt tight. "Before dessert," I said, voice steady, "I need an answer." Eyes flickered. My husband swallowed. My mother-in-law pursed lips. Corinne's smile narrowed, wary. I didn't rush. I pulled out my phone, displayed the scanned deed, showing my name removed. The room froze. I said, "I've documented everything. I will not stay silent anymore." The words hung between them like a final judgment. I turned away and walked out of the dining room, leaving the hush behind me. In the dim hallway, I felt presence. A figure stepped behind me, slipping a sealed envelope into my coat pocket. I halted, heart thudding, and read the front. Part 2, What You Really Own. I came back from errands at dusk, carrying groceries I didn't even remember picking up. The house was still. No television, no radio, no hum from the fridge that could soften the silence. I dropped the bags on the counter and stared at the red folder Exhibit A and the USB drive Jolene had given me weeks ago. My hands hovered above them, not yet ready to touch. Every slight I'd endured paraded through my mind. The dinners, the jokes, the paperwork I signed without thanks. On my phone, unsent draft messages blinked like ghosts. One to Corinne, one to my husband, one to nobody. I closed them all. Tonight I wasn't going to be the quiet one anymore. Tonight the silence would belong to them. The knock came soft, like a secret. Jolene stood there with her hair windblown, clutching an envelope and a small USB. She didn't step inside until I nodded. She whispered, "I've been digging old bank statements, transfers to shell companies from Corinne. I can't prove everything yet, but this," she held up the USB, "this could unmake them all." My fingers brushed hers as I took it. The weight was more than plastic. I could feel the risk embedded inside. "Use caution," she said. "They'll fight like cornered dogs." I thanked her. I wanted to tell her she'd just handed me a weapon, but all I could manage was a quiet, "I know." Fear flickered at the edge of my resolve. If I exposed this, would I survive the fight? Jolene scrolled through her phone, then showed me a news article from the local paper, a glowing piece about the family business's expansion, photos of ribbon cuttings, testimonials about the legacy built by family. My name wasn't anywhere. I scanned twice. "You're not in it," Jolene said, as if I couldn't see. I read the line aloud, a tradition maintained by hard work and unity. Years of my work erased in a handful of sentences. The erasure wasn't just private, it was public, it was deliberate. I closed my eyes. How many times had I allowed them to frame the narrative? How many times had my contributions been hidden, my name omitted, my voice softened until it disappeared? I gathered the USB, the folder, my phone. Pacing across the living room, my reflection in the dark window looked like someone rehearsing a speech to a ghost. I murmured, "I brought proof. I expect answers." My heartbeat slowed with each repetition. Justice delayed is still justice denied. I walked to the dining room door. On the other side, muffled voices, clinking glasses. They were already gathered, laughing in that low, knowing way. I put my hand on the knob. For a moment I felt the same old tremor. Then it left me. I opened the door. All eyes turned. My husband frowned. Corinne's smile flickered like a bulb about to die. I stepped inside, holding the USB in one hand, the red folder under my arm. "I have one question," I said evenly. "Why erase me?" The silence swelled. It pressed at my ears, and then my husband's phone rang. He excused himself, stepping aside, turning his back. I watched him read a text, his jaw tighten. He didn't look at me when he said under his breath, "You shouldn't have done that." My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. Their threats had arrived. They had answered my proof with warning. When I walked back into that living room, folder tucked under one arm and USB in the other, every inch of me was screaming. Not from fear, not anymore, but from the weight of what I carried. I scanned the room, the same faces, the same seats, the same pretending. Except now I wasn't playing along. Laughter rose in fragments. Gideon raised a glass. Toasts clinked. The luxury surrounding them, polished wood, catered spread, the wine they liked to flaunt, it was built brick by brick on sacrifices I was told to not make a big deal about. I walked to my spot, sat without waiting for approval, let the tension bloom, one breath in, one out. Corinne broke the quiet first, her voice light, almost amused. "Planning to contribute tonight?" The edges of her smile didn't reach her eyes. My husband offered to pour wine. I declined. Not tonight. I laid the folder on the table, set the USB beside it. For a long second, I just looked around. Then I started. One time I covered payroll out of my personal account. 2014. No thanks. No record. I flipped a page. In 2016, I revised the vendor contract to save us 80 grand. Again, I was told it was expected. The chatter dimmed, forks dropped. I kept going, naming dates, deals, invoices, no venom, just truth. Then I clicked the USB into the speaker's port. A male voice played over the room, our old lawyer's recorded call. I'd forgotten I had it until Jolene reminded me. The voice outlined amendments to our partnership agreement, hidden clauses, quiet asset transfers, subtle removals, all signed. I paused the audio. Here, I said, lifting a printed copy from the folder, is the amendment no one told me about. Notice who signed it. I handed it to Gideon. He blinked, then squinted. His own signature, barely changed from years ago, stared back. I watched his jaw slacken ever so slightly. Corinne opened her mouth. I didn't give her the space. You signed this too, I said, placing another sheet in front of her. This one links your name to 3 LLCs, all traced to ghost addresses. She stood halfway up. This is slanted. Sit, I said calmly. Rory, we're not done. She sat. Then I reached for the last page. I held it in the air, then lowered it slowly. You joked once that I could vanish, that I was quiet enough to forget. Well, I did vanish, emotionally, but not from the truth. I laid the page down. My husband stood next. This has to be mistaken, misread. You're twisting things. I met his eyes and said flatly, mistake or manipulation? I'm ready to prove which one. I stood slowly. My voice never shook. I'm not here to beg. I'm here to reclaim. I laid it out, a seat on the board, my name restored to all deeds, a written public acknowledgement of what I built alongside them. You have 48 hours. Then I turned. No dramatics, no slamming doors, just silence. Behind me, thick, dense, panicked. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. A message, no name attached. If you push this, you'll lose more than you think. I walked onto the porch, let the wind wrap around me like a cloak. I stared into the dark. They threatened me. Fine, I was never afraid of their shadows. The room after my disclosure felt like the pause before a storm breaks. No one moved. Corinne sat stiff, eyes darting, but lips pressed tight. My husband's face had lost all colour. Gideon's hands trembled against the edge of the table, his glass quivering just enough to leave a ring on the wood. I stood still, letting the silence stretch longer than any argument they could mount. The truth had landed, and its weight was heavier than the polished furniture or the expensive wine in front of them. For years, I had been the one to fill the silence. Tonight, I let them sit in it. In my mind, their old joke played again. If you vanished. The first time they said it, I laughed weakly and brushed it off. Later, it cut like a blade. I had vanished just as they wanted, out of their narrative, out of the photos, out of the deeds. And yet here I was, standing in their living room, writing my own line back into their story. I leaned slightly forward, voice low but clear. I vanish from your story. Tonight I write my own. The words hung in the air. Corinne flinched as if the echo itself carried power. I placed my demands again on the table, not with rage, but with finality. Return my name to the deeds, restore my seat, acknowledge publicly what I built, and compensate what was taken. You have 48 hours. Corinne's eyes darted. She whispered, You'll destroy us. I didn't blink. You destroyed me first. My husband tried to cut in a weak, honey, maybe, but I raised a hand, palm outward. I don't need your permission now. His mouth closed, the room tightening around my words. Corinne pushed her chair back sharply, muttering about lawyers. Gideon rose, his face a map of conflict, his age suddenly visible. Jolene appeared in the doorway with another envelope, her voice calm as she handed it to me. More evidence, bank transfers, logos, confidential memos. My lawyer's summary had already gone to the local press. Even without headlines, the sirens of scandal were audible in my imagination, echoing down the hall like approaching thunder. Watching their stability crack wasn't sweet. It was justice served cold, steady, without glee. When the last of them left, the house was too quiet, like the air after an earthquake. I stepped onto the porch. The night air pressed against my skin, cool, steadying. The loneliness of that moment was sharp but not empty. For the first time, I felt a stillness that belonged to me. They didn't have to validate me anymore. I would never disappear quietly again. On the railing lay the silver serving spoon I had given them years ago, left behind like a relic. I picked it up, felt its weight, and whispered to no one, "You thought you erased me." But I became the echo no one could silence. I locked the house, keys clicking like punctuation to a sentence I had been writing for decades. Walking down the steps, I looked at my car. Mine alone, no shared. Loans, no family ties. I opened the door, the cool leather catching the porch light. A breeze scattered dry leaves across the street, rattling like new beginnings. I turned once more to the house behind me. They searched for me yesterday. Tonight I found myself.